Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Christy Barber Consulting Live. It is my honor to be your guest host today. I'm Kyler Cheatham from The Confluential, joined by my good friend and colleague, Christy Barber. And today we're jumping on to do a quick conversation about the financial advice every founder needs to know. And just to kind of give you some background as to why we chose this topic is, just to, because Christy's so humble, to kind of give you some background on her. She is the most sought after SMB consultant in our entire industry. Everyone knows that. And just, over years of her reputation of doing such great work. And the reason that I say that is because she's had a front row seat to some founders making some terrible financial decisions and has been able to kind of advise them out of it. Anytime, I'm serious, anyone in the industry has a small business or a family-owned business that has really complex dynamics, whether it be a startup or a 100-year-old, fourth generation family-owned business, you're going to bring in Christy because she understands those dynamics and most importantly, understands the financials. I don't know anyone else in the industry that can do that. So today we're just going to rattle off some top financial advice that if you were a founder or even a small business SMB CEO and you were thinking about certain financial advice, this is kind of what she would give you. So with that, Christy, thank you for taking the time to share with us today. Before I turn it over to you to kind of give your first nugget of advice, I'm going to turn to the audience. We can see all of your comments come in. I already see a few, so thank you for joining us today. And you can pop your comments or questions or your own advice. That's the point of having these conversations, to share your advice too in the comments. We'll kind of pull them up, talk about them, answer your questions. As always, we go back in and answer after the live, or if you're joining through watching it again later today or tomorrow, then you'll be able to ask questions in real time. We'll pop back in there and answer them. So with that, Christy, what is the first piece of financial advice or a hard truth that you'd like to give those founders out there, those innovators, those people that have built things from the ground up, but now it's time to grow up as a company. It's time to standardize. And that is a hard inflection point for specific founders.
It is. And there's a lot of little things. And I think the biggest one has always been, don't mix personal and business. Mm-hmm. I see that with so many people that are first starting out, because it's one of those, hey, I have this idea. I'm kind of just testing it. Mm-hmm. Is it going to sell? Am I going to make any money? And all of a sudden, you have $100,000 of business in your personal account. And while that's great, it just isn't great at the same time, because you need to be able to track your expenses. You need to be able to have a good idea of how your business is doing. And if you're mixing those, you can't get a clear picture. And this has happened repeatedly over the last couple of months with new clients, and then just ones I've had over the last, my business will be 14 years old this fall, which is crazy.
Congrats. That's amazing. That's
I had to look the other day. Somebody asked me and I was like, I don't remember. And thank goodness for LinkedIn that can remind me. Yeah. I knew it was a long time, but it was fun. But that has been the biggest thing, I think, is that mixing. And going back to a couple of clients that I've worked with this year, that has been an issue, especially now that we have a lot more tools like Venmo, we have PayPal, we have all of these things that are also linked to personal side. And it's hard not to, use those. You want to make sure that you're not mixing it. Set up a separate Venmo for your business, a separate one, a separate PayPal for your business, all of that, because otherwise we can't get a true picture of how your business is doing. And your CPA will very much appreciate you and love you if you have those already split out for them to make life easy for your taxes.
Absolutely. This is not a side hustle anymore, right?
No.
You have to start thinking like an owner. So building those foundational pieces are so, so incredible and incredibly important, I should say. So we talk about kind of every founder wears the 4 financial hats, right? We've got the bookkeeper, the controller, the CFO, and the CEO. And I wonder, when there's like an inflection point, how do you see that the founder is no longer doing those jobs, outside support, whether it be from technology or another resource, right? A human resource. How do you have those conversations with that founder?
They can be really tricky, and there's a lot of emotion that gets tied into it as well. As you started this business from the ground up, it's your sweat and tears and anger and happiness, all of that that goes into it. And you get to that point of, hey, this isn't necessarily your role. That's not your expertise. Your expertise is in selling and making sure that your product or service is getting well represented out to your clientele. And sometimes you have to have those really hard conversations. And I've had a lot of those over the years,
Yeah.
coming from smaller businesses, especially when they've grown pretty quickly and they're making 10+ million dollars a year. And the owner, who does not have the expertise to be in the financial part
Mhm.
of the business. And this is a lot, is yes, you are the founder. Yes, you need to understand your
Mhm.
expenses and what's going into it. But at the end of the day, you don't normally, you do not have the skills to be the accountant. You don't have the skills
Yeah.
set to be doing the daily bookkeeping. You do have the skill set to learn and to understand your numbers, and you need to learn that as a check and
Mhm.
balance. But it is not your job to be like, hey, I am out building XYZ of my product, and then coming into your accounting department and saying, hey, why is this taking so long? It shouldn't take you long. Well, it's not your area of expertise. And so
Mhm.
a lot of times I've seen that founders don't know what's going on, and then they start disgruntling and stirring the pot with their accounting department, and it just causes a lot more problems than it should. And that's usually a really good sign that, yes, you as the founder should be stepping way out of anything to do with finance, and let the people you hire that you trust to do their job well can represent your company and give you the numbers that you know you need to have.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you've probably seen this even in conversations you've had as well. And
Mhm.
it I mean, I had a client, gosh, probably it's been about 8 years ago now, and the owner of the company wanted to be the CEO.
Mhm.
And this goes to everybody out there, and this is not like a hit in the throat or anything like that. Like, I'm not trying to like knock you down 50 notches, but a lot of times there are founders that come in, and yes, you're really good at selling a product, you cannot run a
Mhm.
company.
Yeah.
And that is nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually something really good, because how many people don't have the gift to sell, but they
Mhm.
have the vision to be able to run a company? And it's knowing and understanding that you are not made for that position,
Mhm.
and that you need to have somebody in that position. And again, going back to this client that I had years ago, that was the problem. He wanted to create this business. He did a great job creating it, but he had no vision to run the company and say, hey, where are we going? We don't have a plan for where we're going. We're just here. And he's angry. He's taking it out on his
Mhm.
employees because he's not in the right seat. When you're in
Mhm.
the right seat and you're utilizing your skill set, you
Mhm.
are going to show up in such amazing ways that your company is going to start thriving. And that's my biggest thing for founders too, is don't chase titles, chase what you're good at, and
Mhm.
people will respect you for
Mhm.
what you're good at, not a stupid title. Because at the end of the day, who cares? And probably I'm the one that you really shouldn't ask that, because I could
Mhm.
care less about
Oh.
most things like that. I'm like, what a waste of time. I just do the work. I don't need 3 extra initials. And just a little side note on that too, that's why I have an MBA, and I should probably be proud that I have one, but I could care less. And so I don't even put it on LinkedIn, because I'm like, yeah, I went to school for, another year and a half. Whoop-de-doo, is kind of, you were just told to do it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's so much good advice wrapped up in there, even outside of the financials. I always say, and I'm a prime example of this, a founder is not a CEO. And you see that in some of the most successful startups. If you go to something like the Inc. 5000 conference and see those companies, the Inc. 5000 list is the 5,000 fastest growing companies here domestically in the States. And the top companies, the top growth, most successful will be on stage at that conference. And every single time you see the founder and the CEO, the
Mhm.
person they brought in to run it. And I mean, I've never really seen a founder be successful CEO, because the CEO needs to put things like behaviors, financial standardization, make those really hard decisions. And people like me that are very good at innovating, creating new ideas, but aren't often as skilled at things that really make businesses successful, like a strong financial and operational
Mhm.
standing. And the faster you can admit that without putting your staff through like a complete whiplash of what you're doing, because we've all worked for that founder or that client that has this new idea, and then we all have to pivot hard to what, he typically, no offense, is talking about. And that can be a really hard culture to work in as an employee too. So that's a huge piece of that. And when we're looking at some of these questions, Christy, these are such great questions. So thank you so much to the
Yeah.
audience. I
Oh,
think,
one thing I want to add
oh,
really
sure.
quick before we move away from that is just a really good example of always having a team of it's the founder and the CEO. I worked in the music industry for a while. For those of you that don't know, I did a side hustle for about 10 years of photography in the music industry. And you think about how many really successful musicians are out there, but they can't write to save their life. And they
Mhm,
have to have a songwriter in the room to produce that hit for them. And
mhm,
that's very similar when you look at a business structure is I can have the founder, and that's usually the front man. Think of that as the lead singer of the band. And he's like, I'm here, we're doing great. But you need this team on the back end to produce these things that make you successful. And we're usually the rest of the team is the unseen. And just like music industry, you more than likely don't know who the songwriters are unless you actually read who wrote the song,
mhm,
unfortunately, because they are extremely talented. But it's that same thing. There's no pride that really shows up in that because it's like we all need to work on this together and be
mhm.
successful.
Absolutely. That's such a good analogy, and definitely, well said. And so, looking at these questions here, I think the one that I like, that could be a good conversation for this is, what are the most common misconceptions founders have about their financial foundations?
I was scrolling up to that one.
It's
There we
it's
go.
I know
It's
Christy's
the
driving.
very
We
first
just switched
one.
that around.
I think few things. One is they think that, hey, if I check my bank balance in my bank, that's how much money I have. That is not true at all. That is by far the worst thing to do. I always tell my clients that is your cash is ever evolving. You have money coming in, you have money going out, and your bank is only showing what has already hit the account as income or what has already come out of it. You always need to have a cash flow document, which is what I create with my clients is we know on a weekly basis what expenses are going to be coming out and what is anticipated to come in. So we have an idea what a balance is and you can kind of plan around that. I think the other thing is people think that, hey, I have an idea, I'm going to start a business and I go. And there's a lot of little things that have to come into place. And I even reflect on a conversation I had yesterday with somebody that's getting ready to kind of start and get out there and do a lot of, design work and other things like that as kind of like a 1099, but they need to make an LLC and not necessarily having a full realistic idea of what goes into even setting the company up properly so
Mhm.
that you are paying your taxes, you are making sure that your expenses are covered, all of those things. And I think that's a misconception that people think, well, as soon as I have a business, I can write off all of these things. Well, yeah, when it's done properly, I don't
Yeah.
want you writing off, hey, I don't know, my grandma came to visit me and I talked to her about my business, so I should be able to write her trip off. I'm like,
Mhm.
no, you can't do that. And so there's just certain things I think founders, because you don't know what you don't know. They don't
Yeah.
teach you
Yeah.
any of this at school. There's not a entrepreneurs 101 class for anybody. And taxes is always something that people are like, oh, yeah, those people. And the industry is changing, and that's something that's really great. But I would
Mhm.
say those are along the lines of the misconceptions that I see most
Mhm.
often.
Yeah, that's a definitely a perfect answer in the fact that it starts at the very beginning. Like we could go into when you're a $500 million
Mhm.
company and you're still considered an SMB, what are the mistakes that you made? But at that point, you've already made 100 mistakes when it comes to getting to that point. When it
Yep.
comes to building, especially if, in our world, you're going to couple it with technology, there has to be a strong foundation for that technology to stand on, or it will just amplify these gaps in your overall infrastructure. And that's where you are spending money on bad tech. And that isn't something that we can do in the SMB world. We don't have
No.
that extra capital to just have a system sitting there that's not being used or that's being used incorrectly.
Mhm. Or just picking a whole bunch of them because your friend told you, "Hey, I use all of these," and you're like, "Cool, sign up for all of them," and you use 10% of it. And
Yeah.
now you're wasting a lot of money that could still be in your bank.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of around those lines, I like this question here of what is a small financial habit that has a massive long-term payoff? I love that type of disciplined thinking, especially in the beginning. And if you can't find that, that's
Found
towards the
it.
top. Yeah, there.
Keep
Okay,
going.
good.
So I think one that has a long-term payoff, I like budgets to a certain extent, and I think it's really important to have those because if you are not having a marketing budget or you're not having a payroll budget, then you're just spending money to spend money. And there was a
Mhm,
book I read years ago. I can't even tell you what the name of it was. If you're listening and you know what it is, put it in the comments. But they wrote about the scenario of when you work or when you get hired by a professional sports team, they have X dollars that are put towards paying their players. And that is it. There's no more, there's no less than that. That is what they have. And if you think about that for your business, if you say, hey, you know what, I can allot, we'll use round numbers, $100,000 for payroll. I can't give out any more because that would be hurting my company and I would start losing money for right now. Then you know I can only spend this much to acquire talent. And what type of talent that requires, that's up to you. But having that balance or budget in place for that, it really is helpful. And I see that even with startups, a lot of times you think, oh my gosh, I have so much on my plate. It'd be great if I had somebody to take this, and you give them the work and they're producing and they're doing the work. So then you go hire another person, but then there's not enough
mhm,
work for two people and now
mhm,
they're costing you. And so understanding what utilization is, meaning I need my employees to produce so many hours per month to cover their payroll costs. That's something that's really important to have. And then hey, where I can add another person in, or hey, I need
mhm,
to wait until adding something in, I think is really helpful. And then like I said, the budgets, just knowing if you're spending X dollars, because I think marketing is one that always really people can go overboard, especially when you're in the e-commerce world and people have told you, well, the only way is you got to spend $1,000 a day and hope that you get the payoff on it. And really digging into where are your marketing dollars going and understanding, are they getting the clicks that you need? Are you getting the results that you need? And if not, then coming up with a different plan, not throwing more money at it. And so those are the things I start to see with founders, not
mhm.
those habits in day one are really going to help you later on.
Absolutely. There's a saying that I feel like really encapsulates this conversation. Revenue feeds ego,
Mm,
profit builds legacy, right? And that's what you need to really understand. And as Christy said in the beginning, that there's no like flex cash, okay, right? Like there's not that level of really understanding that burn rate and budget. What does that really look like for your type of um, your type of industry? So in kind of looking at this conversation, how do you know when you need help? in your area. Maybe it's not like a full-time resource, right? Because you're like, okay, like I can kind of do the books. I got this. I'm considering a fractional CEO. Well, how do you know when you need to bring a CPA, a bookkeeper or someone like that into the business? What are some red flags founders might be experiencing out there that are listening, that are seeing like, hey, I might need to consider someone's help with this?
Yeah. So actually, it's perfect timing on that because I had a conversation the other day with a lady that started a business just out of she had to and didn't know how to set things up, has lapsed on a few things because she didn't know. And she's like, yeah, I've used TurboTax to file, which TurboTax has its place. I don't ever recommend it for business, just like
Yeah.
I don't recommend H&R Block or Jackson Hewitt for your business because they're not fantastic and they're not going to do what's best for you. Always have I'm going to call it a real CPA,
Mhm.
not anything like that. But that was her problem is she ran things on TurboTax and then all of a sudden she had to owe all this money because
Mhm.
there's things that she didn't know. And TurboTax, and again, I'm not in this conversation TurboTax, so please don't come at me to really know what was going on. But her thing was she got bad advice from TurboTax of
Mhm.
how to put things in, and now it's making her pay a lot of money. Where if she had a real CPA that she can meet with face to face, she's having this conversation and saying, hey, I have real estate that owns the land that my business is on, and I'm doing XYZ with these transactions, and how best does this need to show up for tax purposes, and getting that information. And that's where I always say day one, when you start your business, get a CPA. Don't use anything else but a CPA. Interview your CPA. Interview 3 of them at a time because there's a lot of garbage ones out there also that are not going to be the right fit for you, just like everything is. And you
Mhm.
got to find the right fit for you that can understand your industry,
Mhm.
all of that. And then I would say on the accounting side, if you have somebody that's doing your books and you're pretty happy with them, it's always good to have maybe somebody come in and just do a quick quarterly audit. How are things going? Things in the right place? Do we have our balance sheet cleaned up? The balance sheet always gets neglected. I would say a lot of bookkeepers that I've come across in my career don't understand the balance sheet, and they're afraid of it and they just leave it off to the side and like, okay, well, we just won't look in that. The P&L tells us what we need to see. And it's like, no, that doesn't tell you the whole story. And
Mhm.
you need to be able to understand that and have somebody that understands that as well.
Yeah, I could not agree more. A CPA is absolutely critical. And until Christy advised on our business, I didn't realize you could interview CPAs. I thought you kind of like, begged them to work for you. And it's almost the same mentality we have with software vendors. I thought like we were lucky enough, to have a CPA, not being able to choose one that's like best for our business. And that's such a great piece of advice, especially people that have a finance degree. Just because you have a finance degree does not mean you're a CPA, right?
No.
So, get that support and make sure that you understand that. If you've raised capital, good for you. That's awesome. That's really, really, really cool. Still get a CPA.
Yeah.
So
You
there's
probably need one a lot
yeah,
more than anybody else if you're raising capital.
yes, absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up this conversation, I know we wanted it to kind of just be a quick conversation in here of giving you quick advice about what you need to do to make sure your business, your small business, or you as a founder are financially savvy and healthy. Anything else big that we missed in this conversation, Christy, that you kind of want to close out on?
I think there's a couple things that get overlooked just because it goes back to you don't know what you don't know. And
Mhm.
especially I've seen e-commerce clients not realize they have sales tax that needs to be paid. There's different rules about how you have to pay in all the states that you sell in. And so making sure you're on top of that. The other thing is I always advise do not use QuickBooks for payroll. at all. I don't think it's a great system, but find somebody that has a payroll service for you. There's a multitude of them out there. There's, your ADPs, your paychecks, but there's also ones that are geared more towards small business. I work with one called Easy Track Payroll in Boulder, Colorado, and they use the Gusto format, but they are the ones that are always staying on top of the ever-changing payroll rules that are out there that you as the founder and even me as the CFO, I'm not keeping up on a lot of that because
Mhm.
that should be your HR department. Yes, do
Mhm.
I know a little bit of it, but I'm not daily reading articles around, hey, what's going on in all of this. And that's something to um really focus on is with the payroll side of things, and then making sure that that ties in to your employee handbook,
Mhm.
those updated rules, and to make sure that you have that. And I'll conclude with that too. Every small business have an employee handbook. And most of the time you think about, oh, that's the big guys. I don't need one of these. You need one because as soon as your first employee comes, you need this done. And they take some time to build. And you want to make sure that you as a business are covered because you don't want to have to end up in situations where, oh man, I wish I had had this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Look at me just writing that down over here. I'm
There
like,
you go, yep. That's a task for next week,
I
Kyler.
know. I'm gonna just follow Christian's advice over here. Jot that down.
Jot that
Um,
down.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic advice. If people, founders have questions for you, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me directly, Christy at ChristyBarber.com. Hit me up on any of my socials. You can also respond with your additional questions in the chat here, and I will get back to them, throughout the week as they come in.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Christy, for your time
Yeah,
today.
thanks.
Thank you to the audience. This has been awesome. If you don't follow Christy, shameless plug, she has an awesome TikTok channel for a lot of these things where she does videos and answers you with these questions. She also has a YouTube channel and is super active here on LinkedIn. So definitely make sure that you're following her there to stay up on all of technology, finance, SMB type of content. So thank you all, and we will see you next time.
Yeah.